Hello there, and welcome to Talking Nerdy, the show where we take various story arcs and events from current comics and we cover them. I'm your host, Obi-Wan Jabroni. Now, for today's story, we'll be covering the X Lives and X Deaths of Wolverine Part 1. X Lives are written by Benjamin Percy, with art by Joshua Cassara, and colors by Frank Martin. X Deaths are written by Benjamin Percy, with arts by Federico Vincentelli and colors by Dijo Lima. Logan, James Howlett, Weapon X, the mutant known as Wolverine, has lived many lives under many identities. But never before has the fate of the future been so intertwined with his past. To prevent a terrible tragedy, Logan must travel to various points in the time to prevent the death of a key figure in mutant history. But that is only the beginning, because for every life, there is a death. So, with that, let's start talking nerdy. First up, we have The X Lives of Wolverine #1, Part 1, Time to Live. We open at the Sunset Cliffs on Krakoa, and we see Wolverine standing on an overlook, and he pulls out a pocket watch and looks at it, and as he does, we get an internal monologue saying, "The watch is broken, and that's why I'm using it. A digital clock makes no sense to me. It sells the lies of a singular moment that doesn't exist, that's already gone. A proper watch lets you see the possibility of all time. That's the truth I know from more than a century of living. That's the reality of a world where I can step through a moonlit gate in Tokyo and onto a sun-washed beach in Rio. Time's sideways and time's forwards. Time's backwards and upside down." And Professor X interrupts his thoughts and joins him on the cliff and says, "It's time." Meanwhile, at the hatchery, Omega Red sneaks in and knocks Gold Balls, or Egg if you're more modern. I prefer Gold Balls still. He knocks him out and drags him to the database and uses Gold Ball's eyes to gain access to the room. He pulled up his file on the computer and sees that Krakoa has betrayed him and had a surveillance tracker put into him during his last resurrection protocol. And at this point, we switch to years ago, during Professor X's birth at the X Mansion. We see Sharon Xavier in bed, about to give birth to and her husband Brian going outside for some air. Brian hears a rustle in the bushes, and his gardener steps out and throws hedge clippers at him. When out of nowhere, Wolverine dives and tackles Brian to safety and tells him to run and get a gun. Brian takes off, and the gardener steps onto the porch. And we see that the gardener has an Omega symbol on his forehead and Omega Red's tentacles. A tentacle shoots out and grabs Logan's foot. Logan pops his claws, and we see that they are made of bone yet again. He cuts himself loose and charges at Omega Red. But before he gets to him, the man changes, and Omega Red leaves his body. Meanwhile, inside the mansion, Brian and his butler are running up the stairs to his bedroom and wife when the butler stops and says, "I'm not feeling myself, sir," and as he raises a pistol, Brian turns to see that he has the Omega symbol on his head and shoots him with a shotgun, instantly killing him. He apologizes and runs up to the room and enters to find a nurse trying to strangle his wife. He goes to shoot her, and she shoots a tentacle out and grabs the gun and smacks him in the head with it, knocking him out. Moments later, Logan bursts through the door, and we switch back to current time. Logan, Professor X, and Jean Grey enter a Cerebro cradle, and as they hook Logan to Cerebro and lay him on a table, we get an internal monologue from him saying, "Here's another way time don't make sense. I might be twice as old as the professor, but he's as close as I got to a father. Some people are older on the inside than on the outside. Like they chewed up clocks and swallowed whole worlds. Then there's Jeannie. Maybe nobody knows me better. Maybe nobody ever loved me better. Every time my guts tell me I'm better off alone, my heart knows better. I guess the broken bits of us came together and formed a kind of family. And Logan's thoughts are cut off as his consciousness is sent back into time, and we see fragments of various points of Logan's long, long life flash before us. Meanwhile, in Moscow, Omega Red walks through a Krakoan gate and starts to attack the Russian military guarding the gate and demanding to see Nikolai Rasputin. Rasputin steps out and says, "Welcome to Russia, Arkady. Welcome home." And we switch back to the past again. The nurse grabs Logan with a tentacle and slams him into the ceiling and floor and then throws him into a giant standing mirror. Logan gets up and charges at the nurse, pinning her to the wall, and before he can kill her, Sharon Xavier shoots Logan with the shotgun, and we see her standing and holding baby Charles. The nurse grabs Sharon with a tentacle when from behind the nurse, Brian appears and gouges the nurse's eyes out. She drops Sharon, who falls to the ground, and drops Charles. Logan gets up and picks up the baby as the nurse charges at him. He dodges last minute, and the nurse goes crashing out the window and smashing into the ground, dying on impact. Logan looks at baby Charles and smiles and says, "Shh, it's all right. I gotcha, Chuck." And there is a flash, and Logan is transported through time and arrives in the middle of a fight during his Weapon X team days. Sabretooth tackles him to the ground, saving him from gunfire. And Logan gets back up and sees that Maverick is also with them, but he doesn't have any memory of this time in his life. And an astral form of Jean Grey appears before him and says, "The target, you're in Colombia, Logan. The target is 25 miles by southwest of here. You have to save Xavier. The clock is ticking." And that ends our first issue. Leading us to the X Deaths of Wolverine #1, Part 2, Time to Die. We open in Scotland, and we see Moira McTaggart run through a Krakoan gate after escaping Mystique during the Inferno event. She runs into the street and steals a truck from a passerby as we get an internal monologue saying, "My name is Moira McTaggart, and Charles and Eric told me I was their savior. They told me that after so many lifetimes of protecting them, they would protect me. They lied, and now Xavier's dream is my nightmare. I'm depowered, I'm exiled, I'm erased, and I have no choice except to run. So I run through the gate Cypher offered me as an escape hatch. I can practically feel Mystique's hot breath on the back of my neck, and then that heat gives way to a cold blast of wind as I find myself home, where my story began, Scotland. I need to buy myself some time. I need to make sure she can't follow. I won't be her lamb to the slaughter. Of course, there's other gates. There's other ways. I can feel Mystique even now. Hunting. There's a certain poetry to it, I suppose. Sending me home. My end is my beginning. Everything about who I used to be is going soon to be gone. But we're not about to just sit back and let them take a blade to our throat, are we? Maybe I caught a cold in the rain. Or maybe not. I've never needed to fear death. But it's time for that to change. But what I feel growing inside of me now is more like a hot rage. And she drives to her childhood home for the night, and we see that she is coughing up blood along the way. Now, a few days later on Krakoa, Black Tom Cassidy is having a drink at the Green Lagoon when an earthquake hits, and he runs outside and goes to a field and starts digging while saying, "The veg. There's something wrong with the veg. There have been earthquakes before, of course. There have been, what with Krakoa always changing, hills rising and valleys deepening in a meadow where there wasn't one before. But not like this. This is different. This is big. Black Tom can feel it in his roots and nerves, a change, an intruder, but nothing fell from above or came from below. So how's that possible? What the bloody hell is this? And he digs and he uncovers a cocoon-like object buried in the ground of Krakoa. Meanwhile, in New York, we see Moria McTaggart at Jane Foster's hospital, and Jane tells her that she has a cancer. The nurse knocks on the door and says that Jane is needed down the hall. Jane leaves, and the nurse shuts the door and morphs back into Mystique. She attacks Moria, throwing her into a wall, and Jane transforms into the Valkyrie and comes bursting through the window and holds off Mystique, telling Moria to run. Back on Krakoa, Black Tom approaches the cocoon, and as he does, it opens up and a shadowed figure walks out and attacks him, killing Black Tom and sneaking off to Moria's no place, hidden in Krakoa. Back in New York, Moria slips into a mall bathroom and dies and cuts her hair, and slips back into the crowd and starts to notice people following her. And we get an internal monologue saying, I don't have much time. They found me at the hospital and they'll find me here. My face is a bullseye. I was invisible in the no place biome. I'll find a way to hide again. I could be anyone, but so could Mystique. But what if it's not just Mystique and Destiny I need to worry about? They've already given themselves away with the earpieces and runner's legs and bodybuilder torsos, not to mention the bulge of shoulder holsters underneath their jackets. CIA. And CIA. The CIA want me in a cell. The mutants want me in a grave. Between them and the cancer eating its way through me, my chances aren't great. But there's one thing I've learned from all of my lives. It's that dying doesn't agree with me. And one of the men grabs her shoulder and tells her to come with him. She elbows him in the face and runs outside to steal a motorcycle and drives away as fast as she can. Back on Krakoa, Jean gets a psychic read on the intruder as he leaves the island, and when we see that it is a techno-organic virus-infested Wolverine. And that ends this issue. Taking us to The X Lives of Wolverine number 2, Part 3, Forgotten Pasts. We open in Canada in 1900. We see a younger, skinnier Logan in a fighting pit facing off against a bear, as we get an internal monologue saying, You ever walked through towering redwoods or stood at the bottom of a canyon banded with eons of color? Then you know what it feels like to get dwarfed by history. Forests have outlived nations. A vein of quartz took a few million years to bake and crystallize. And on the one hand, this knowledge makes you feel like a smear of nothing. On the other hand, it makes you feel like part of everything. A fossil clings to the limestone, a flower sprouts in a patch of melted snow. A man plants fields or paints a chapel ceiling or experiments with electricity. Some of us are here longer than others. But in that time, we are all doing our damnedest to leave the mark on the planet. I've got all the time, and I got no time. And I'm going to put a good dent in the universe, or I'm going to die trying. And he escapes the pit, defeats the bear, and steals a dog sled and rides off with Jean guiding him. And we switch to Columbia during Logan's Weapon X days. And during a firefight, Logan slips off into the woods with Jean, and she tells him that Charles is nearby, in a village. And Logan stops and says, I didn't remember at first, but I remember now. Seeing the lab, it busted open a lock in my brain. After we destroy it, we go after the surrounding villages too. Hundreds of villagers mowed down, mass graves, burn piles. We were supposed to send a message. Fear America more than you fear the cartel. You don't understand, Jeannie. This version of myself, it's the one I hate the most. I did bad things, unforgivable things, and I've been the one living with them. And he runs back towards his team, saying he has to stop them. And we switch back to 1900, and we see a ship captained by Captain Xavier, Charles Xavier's grandfather, sailing through the frozen oceans around northern Canada. And one of his crew attacks him, and we see he is infected by the Omega Red. And Xavier struggles, but is able to throw him overboard, and he turns to see the rest of his crew infested and moving in on him. In the distance, we see Logan approaching the ship on his dog sled. Meanwhile, back in Cambodia, Logan approaches his team and instantly unloads into Sabretooth's head and shoots Maverick in the knee. He tells Maverick to survive and runs back into the woods. And we switch to an unknown time just after World War II, sometime in Japan. And we see Logan making love to a woman named Itsu. When they are done, they lay holding each other until the Omega symbol appears on her head, and she lashes out, attacking him with tentacles. As he tries to fend her off without hurting her, we get an internal monologue saying, "Some parts of my mind have rotted. Others have been scrubbed clean. But if history is good at anything, it's punishing me. I remember everything about this time, so it lingers in my brain like a raw wound. With World War II in the rear view, I studied under Bondo Soroto, which was trying to teach me to leave my warrior self behind. And now, here I am, being put to the test. A test I can't pass. I've got back my dead wife, just in time to lose her again. Itsu is gonna die, but I can't be the one to kill her. There are consequences, Jean says. My own unborn child is that consequence. Dakin. I can't. I can't not either." And that ends this issue. Bringing us to The X Deaths of Wolverine #2, Part 4, Dead Run. And we open in Oklahoma, and we see Moria go into a gas station and get various supplies. She gets to the counter and pulls a gun on the clerk, and tells him to ties him up and leaves, calling Jane Foster as she pulls out with her supplies. Jane tells her that she has studied the cancer samples and found that it has strange fluoronic material in it. And Moria says, "They did this to me," and throws the phone out the window. And we go to later in New Mexico. We see Moria sitting on a motel bed, drinking, and we get an internal monologue saying, "This wasn't supposed to be how things turned out. It was my dream too, you know. It was my dream as much as his. I've gone from being the secret weapon they've protected to the curse they want to erase. Mystique found me. She's gonna find me again. And I've got a pretty good guess as to how she's doing it." And she fills the bathtub up with iodine and then quickly cuts off her techno-organic arm that Cypher and Warlock gave her, and closes the wounds with iron. Now, elsewhere in the hotel, we see Mystique torturing the front desk attendant, and we learn what room Moria is in. She goes to the room and kicks the door open to find only Moria's arms sitting on the bed. She approaches and hears a ticking as a bomb hidden under the bed goes off and kills Mystique. Later on, we see fire crews and police at the hotel, and we see the techno-organic Logan approach the burning hotel. He kills the nearby police and enters and tries to find Moria. Meanwhile, on a nearby hilltop, Moria watches the Techno Logan enter her room, and we get an internal monologue from her saying, "I've lived, and I've died, and I've lived, over and over and over again. The mutants always meet their end. They wanted this time to be different, and they got their wish. I've seen the future. I just didn't think it would get here so damn fast." And that ends this issue. Taking us to today's final issue, The X Lives of Wolverine #3, Part 5, Lives to Regret. We open on Krakoa, and we see Jean and Professor X still mind-linked to the unconscious Wolverine. And we get an internal monologue from him saying, your clothes and your car and your home, your family, even your body, all the things you think belong to you don't. Everything's temporary, except me. Except fucking me. Everybody wants to live forever, but here's the thing. The shorter your stay, the more you treasure what you got. The longer you live, well, I can only say I'm tired. And I'm really fucking tired. Because as long as the living don't end, neither does the fighting. Every soldier hopes for an end. An Alamo, a Normandy, a Gettysburg. The battle that kills the war. But I've been in the trenches long enough to know there's never any clear point of victory or loss. The wheel keeps turning, grinding. The cycle of violence never ends. Blood's the only thing that lasts. And we switch to northern Canada in 1900. Captain Xavier pulls out his gun and starts to fend off the Omega-infested crew while Logan finally makes it to the boat. When a giant Omega-infested whale bursts up through the ice towards the boat and Logan lunges at it. And we switch to a post-war Japan. The Omega-infested Itsu throws Wolverine through a wall and into a pond, and she charges and holds Logan under the water as she says, I thought I'd try something different this time, since you keep getting in my way. Before I go hunting for Xavier, I'm taking you out of the equation. You're the same kind of killer you accuse me of being, but even you, I don't think, would murder the mother of your unborn child. Jean, you can't even keep your lover straight, can you? And all of a sudden, her grip loosens and the water turns red, and Logan raises out of the water to see his old villain Romulus, with Itsu raised into the air and his claws shoved through her chest. And we switch to Colombia many years ago. We see Logan running through the jungle towards Charles's location when he is shot in the arm. He looks back and sees Sabretooth chasing after him, and he shoots a nearby wasp hive that falls and hits Sabretooth, causing the wasps to swarm. Logan keeps running, and we get an internal monologue from him saying, jaguars, piranhas, hand-sized spiders, flesh-eating fungi, parasites that crawl up your urethra. Every inch of this place wants to kill you. Sometimes it's hard to know what's the greater danger, the Amazon, Sabretooth, Omega Red, or time. Time's the ultimate killer. Jean tells me I've got 10 miles yet to cover to save Xavier. There's a million things in my way, but time most of all. But I should have been gray-haired and bent with arthritis long ago. The less time there is, the more dangerous. And I should have been gone and buried 1,000 times over. So, until I wind down to zero, I keep jamming up the gears of the doomsday clock. And back in 1900, a tentacle shoots from the whale and grabs Captain Xavier, and Logan appears, cutting the captain free and starting to slash the whale with his claws. Xavier recovers and grabs a barrel of fire and throws it at the whale's mouth. And back in Japan, Logan lashes out and hits Romulus with a fast flurry of hits and says he don't have time for this. Romulus eventually breaks free and runs off into the woods. Logan turns to Itsu and sees that she is restored to herself and completely healed now. Logan embraces her as Jean appears and tells him they need to go now. Back in Colombia, we see Xavier giving a speech on TV while standing with a local tribesman. Meanwhile, Logan exits the forest on the edge of the village and tells Jean that he don't see any Omegas anywhere. Jean says he has to be here, when suddenly Logan doubles over and yells. When he raises back up, we see that he is now infected by Omega Red. He pops his claws as tentacles grow from his wrists. And that ends part 1 of the X Lives and X Deaths of Wolverine. I hope you enjoyed this week's video. Join us next week as we continue the X Lives and X Deaths of Wolverine, Part 2. Thanks for watching. As always, remember to like, subscribe, and share our videos to help spread the brand through the world. Also, feel free to leave a comment down below. Feedback is always welcome. Now, you can also find us on the Jabroni Nerd Facebook page, so be sure to follow us over there. So, until next week, guys, keep talking nerdy.